So what I want to talk about today is how we play stories, and really that's like thinking about like lifting off of what Lance and Errol were talking about. Like games are successful, games work well, games make a lot of money, reach a lot of people. How do they actually do what we want them to do in this context, which is tell stories? So for this purpose, I want to talk about a project that I worked on actually with Lance and the CFC called Body Mind Change. And this project was a transmedial project tied to a retrospective of Cronenberg's work. And David Cronenberg wanted to create a new piece of work for this, and so Lance commissioned me as a game designer to work with him to think about how we would make this property work. Now, this experience was basically, it started as a website for the user. You would come to a website and you would log into this thing called Pod, and the narrative was that Cronenberg had licensed all his technology to a startup that was going to use it to create a unique sort of recommendation engine that would tie to your neural network and create recommendations of desires that you didn't even know you had. So I think when we think about this, we kind of have to ask ourselves, well, where is the story in all of this? Like, if we look at this transmedial piece as a whole, like, where does the narrative live? And I think this is the typical question we ask when we have games and story, right? OK, so there's a game with story in it. Where is the story in the game, right? And the answer is everywhere. There is no part of the experience that does not have story in it, if it's designed right. And even if it's designed poorly, that's true too. You just missed an opportunity to tell story in certain places. Now, the video part of this experience, we know where the story is, right? We all know how to consume that. But what does it mean to have story in a point-and-click interaction, right? What does it mean to actually have story in that moment? How does point-and-clicking become narrative? How does interacting with a digital object become narrative? How does choice become narrative? Similarly, how is a poll narrative? Like, how is answering a question for someone narrative? And I'm not just talking about the writing the question, but I'm talking about the answer to the question, too. And in that sense, why, for example, are the faces designed the way they are designed? Why are they laid out where they're laid out? Why do I click them as opposed to doing other things? All of that is potentially part of the narrative experience that you're trying to create. That moment where I get to interact is not somehow a bridge to the story. It's not like there's story before it and story after it, and then I ride the choice to the story. That moment of choice is storytelling. And we can see, actually, this happens over and over again in interactive systems, right? We can find lots of interactive systems exploring different things, and we're in a renaissance of this. Or you could call it a renaissance if it ever happened before, maybe just a naissance of this, and that games are starting to explore this for the first time, but in a deep way. So you could look at a game like Passage by Jason Rohr, which explores aging. And you could see in this screen how the screen is fuzzier on the right side of the screen than on the left. That's because you're young. As you get older, the things in front of you get clearer, but the things behind you get blurrier. Or we could talk about this from the perspective of a game like Shadow of the Colossus, where you fight giant monsters in an attempt to save your dead lover. Giant monsters which have never done anything to you, and all you do is struggle over and over again through loss to continue forward, making you wonder, as you have to climb these giant creatures and hold on for dear life, what exactly you are holding on to and why. And these are just a few examples of games that go on, and I've given the designers of them, and you can see they're all different. This is a space that games are moving into quickly and sharply, and with a lot of ambition and experimentation. Games shouldn't do this alone. All of transmedia can do this, because this is all just interactivity. And so there isn't an interactive project that couldn't do this. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that if you have interactivity in your work, you're making an aesthetic statement with it, right? Because the interactivity is part of your story. So any interactive experience a piece contains is part of the narrative of that piece. So if you make the aesthetics of play in such a way that you can explore that interactivity as a part of your story, then your story is stronger. I mean, the easiest way I can say this is that you don't make a movie and then treat the lighting like it was something not that important that just someone else could do at the end. Just sort of throw the sound in at the end and don't really worry about it because it's not part of your story, right? Or just get someone else to do it and then come in at the last minute and check the box to say, oh, yeah, we had sound in our movie, right? Like, gameplay is like that. Interactivity is like that. It is as much a part of what you do if you have it as any other piece of your narrative. And so it needs to be treated with the same kind of care. And that care is the aesthetics of play. Thank you.